Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Jennifer Fraser. Jennifer Fraser, best-selling author, award-winning educator, has a PhD in comparative literature. Her online courses and workshops provide dynamic lessons in the impact neuroscience has on personal development and culture change. Her previous book, Teaching Bullies, Zero Tolerance on the Court or in the Classroom, explores what happens when the bully is a teacher or a coach. Her new book, The Bullied Brain, Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health, delves into how bullying affects the brain and how the brain can heal. Learn more at bulliedbrain.com. And today we talked so much about how yelling scars the brain, feeling threatened, causing either you to freeze, have fright or flight, or when someone is triggered, it causes them the fight mode, which is probably why they're yelling, and how to heal from these type of things and how they affect our brain. That even in brain scans, it shows the damage that being in an abusive situation can really scar your brain, and why a person that's being abused, taken advantage of, sexually assaulted, all of the things, might not talk about it, react, and tell somebody about it, carry it with them into mid-age before they recognize what was actually done to them and how criminal it was. And today, Jennifer really talks about the red flags, the warning signs, not to just trust somebody because they're in a position of power, because they're a priest, a doctor, a lawyer, a policeman, a relative. And we both go into our experiences with similar types of abuse. And Jennifer talks all about the neuroscience, about people being bullied, kind of how it happens. It was a conversation. It was so therapeutic. And many of you out there, I know, are going to start healing from things that have happened to you. It starts a conversation. And I always get a lot of DMs on this type of a topic. So without further ado, we're going to dive in, and just know this also, I think, helps you understand how important it is to protect your children and to be diligent in all ways. So we are diving into this episode with the one, the only Jennifer Fraser. I am so excited to welcome Jennifer Fraser to the Sisterhood of Sweat today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda.
Oh my goodness. We had a little technical difficulty before we started. And isn't that the way sometimes? You just have to roll with the punches, whatever is going on in your life. You just have to kind of learn to not let it phase you, because not everything always runs smooth. And I think we all have different paths in life. And today we're going to be talking about being bullied and suffering from abuse and things that are definitely not a smooth path, and you can heal from it. And I know Jennifer is going to be telling us her story today, but like, you could be suffering in silence and carry it with you through adulthood. But today, the good news is that you can free yourself from a lot of the things you don't even realize are still affecting you today. And so I just want to start with Jennifer, you kind of telling us your story about in high school when you were being abused and nobody knew it.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you put that, because what's fascinating to me now, being a researcher and an author who's looking back, what I realize is I didn't know I was being abused. And really, when you've been on the planet for 13 years, I mean, the biggest trip I had taken internationally was to Disneyland with my family. So, I mean, imagine that person, that brain, that kid. I knew nothing. And nobody had ever sat me down and said, you know what? Most teachers and coaches and doctors are dentists. They're fabulous. They care about you. They're going to take care of you. You need to respect them and obey them and trust them. But there are some, a very small number, who are dangerous, and they will manipulate you. And this is what you have to watch out for. Nobody ever told me that. So it never occurred to me when I was 13 years old that my science teacher might actually be, as a middle-aged man, or, interested in very, very young teenage girls. That was not a concept that existed for me. No one had ever talked to me about it. Thus, I knew nothing. So, still today, cut to 30, 40 years later, I mean, we are not sitting our kids down for the most part and telling them, look, here's what you have to watch out for. This is the language you use to report it. This is why it's very, very serious. It can do a lot of harm to you. Come and tell me if X, Y, or Z happens.
And when all this was going on, I mean, I'll just say too, many people have listened to this show. It can so be a person of trust, because that's how they get the entrance. That's how they're able to do the abuse. And many times that's why they seek those positions. And it can be family members, which happened to me. It was my own grandfather, and I was 8. And so, like, they groom you, and this is a person that you trust and idealize and respect, and then you're placed in their hands and nobody else is around. And I know it affected me and still does today. I'm really still healing from it. And so you didn't tell anybody, right?
There was nothing to tell, because I literally had no concept. I couldn't, in neuroscience, what they talk about is emotion concepts. So what's fascinating to me is you almost can't experience the emotion. You can't go to a parent or a trusted person and say, I feel violated. Here's the reasons why, because you don't have the language to have the feeling. So the way the brain makes sense of reality is, if I said to you, Linda, when you see a loving family member who cares for you, your feelings should be happiness, connection. You should feel that this person's trustworthy, and you should feel a kind of delight because you're going to be with them, and you're going to be safe, and it's going to be wonderful. That's how so the brain sees a family member, including a grandfather, and it predicts that this is a healthy encounter and a delightful encounter. But if you haven't had a parent or someone influential in your life say to you, hey, Linda, you need to develop the emotion concept for skepticism. You need to actually recognize that even if someone's close to you, even if they have the stamp of approval from the other adults in your world, that doesn't 100% make them safe. I want you to be cautious. I want you to have the emotion concept and predict in this situation that there is a moment of caution required, because you're vulnerable. You're just a kid. And this person has an enormous amount of power over you. So you have to keep your wits about you. But you see, without that emotion concept, your brain is not able to make sense of the encounter. And when your brain can't make sense of the encounter, and this is why it's so hard to recover, it starts to what's the word for it? Like degrade all systems or put them offline. That's why there's a kind of vertigo that comes with being abused. There's all kinds of bodily reactions you have. There's many sorts of visible traumas to the brain that can be seen on a brain scan. It's not like you walk away uninjured from those types of encounters. They're scarring, and it can be seen by the scientists in the lab on a brain scan.
Well, I think it's harmful for so many reasons. First of all, you're vulnerable, you're innocent, you have trust in this person. So that's why I think it's so important for parents to really go over this kind of stuff with their kids, and to not just trust someone because they say they're the pastor, they're the priest. they're the high school teacher, the relative. I mean, it was kind of surprising after I came out. I mean, I was silent for 55 years and I came out on my podcast about it. The people that, DM'd me afterwards that had, family members and uncles and, just the list is truly endless and it goes on and it's kept secret because shame only lives in secret, right? And I think you get all these messages, and one of them I felt that I received was that boundaries, should have stopped at my skin, but like they didn't, and I was violated and nobody did anything about it. And I told my parents. Back then it used to be shoved under the rug and you don't speak about it anymore. But I carried the shame and the early awareness of sex at 8, like who at 8 once needs to know about that. And I think like it's just this real conversation in so many ways that needs to be had. It needs to be had in the way of, don't stay silent, but also how can we be vigilant to prevent? And I read your story, and I'd like to kind of tell the experience when you went on this camping trip so that people see how these things happen.
Yeah, well, okay. So it started I was in grade 8. I had just started high school. I was 13 years old and I was in this science class. And my science teacher was just so nice, so friendly, really wanted to talk all the time, just really seemed to get kids and just had a sort of laid back, kind demeanor about him. He was an incredibly likable person. And the first time, there were 2 times in that year that I got a sense that there was just a strange feeling as a kid that there was something off. And one of them was he was a coach of the senior boys basketball team. And I saw him in the bleachers and he was with the team. And so I just, of course, walked by, here I am, this little grade 8 nobody. And he said to me, oh, come on over and talk to me. And the boys kind of dispersed and he put his arm around me, which I felt felt weird. And he said to me, you can interrupt me anytime you like. If I'm talking, with the team or other kids, you can interrupt me. And I don't know, it just didn't sit right with me. I just thought, well, why? Like, that's strange. And then at the end of the year, I'm a terrible science student, terrible. I'm terrible at math as well. And I know that, it's a fact. I'm really good at language, really good at literature, critical thinking, analysis, and I'm not good at science. And I didn't do well on any of my tests. And I tried. And at the end of the year, he gave me an A. And I confronted him as a kid. I said, why did you give me an A? This doesn't make any sense. I'm not an A student. We both know that. I can't do well on any of the science tests or assignments. And you know what? This is sort of the beginning of not remembering. I don't remember what he said.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I got you there.
Yeah, I mean, and what's interesting, it goes, I wanted to say something, Linda, about shame, and it's the same thing with not remembering. What I find really powerful is that the brain makes you feel shame to protect you. Because when an animal feels shame or a human animal feels shame, they make themselves small, they put their heads down, they don't meet your eyes, they don't provoke you. And your brain has decided that you're in a lot of danger and it actually cares a whole ton about you. But it's just that because we're not taught about these things and we're not taught about our brains, we don't learn that after this horrendous violation happens, then now is the time to say, you know what, brain, I'm safe now. I'm going to not let this happen again, and you can stand down. We don't have to keep feeling ashamed for the next, lifetime. It's okay. I got this. The mind is in charge, and you did a great job, but we don't need to be ashamed anymore. We don't have those conversations. We don't teach our children to have them, etc. So this science teacher and this lack of memory is the same thing. What your brain is doing is putting dangerous experiences, traumatizing experiences into a box so that they don't overwhelm and distress you, and you can get on with all the things you have to do in order to survive in life. So cut to this science teacher was really encouraging me to be in this outdoor education program, and you had to be chosen to get in, and it was a really big deal at the school, and it was run by 3 teachers. And so I got into the program not knowing that 2 of the 3 teachers were sexual abusers. And of course, the science teacher must have known because he joined the program a year later. So when I was in the program, he wasn't part of it, but he joined a year later, and then he was one of the 3 teachers, and it was now 3 teachers who were sexual abusers all working together. And it was a really great setup because they could take us out into the wilderness where we were utterly, like, for our lives dependent on them, which once you've got a power imbalance like that, it's so easy to be a victim. If someone's holding your life in their hands because there's grizzly bears, because there's waterfalls, because there's ice caves, because you're canoeing on rapids, their power it's exponential. So this is what they did. They got us out there. So, what abusive people do is they start, especially people that are trying to sexually abuse children, they're very adept and they're very patient. It's not a sexual impulse in any kind of normal sense, like an adult to adult. There's no real sex. There's no physical impulse to do that. What there is an impulse to do is to get the child, trap the child, control and conquer the child, violate the child. I mean, these are the real impulses, and they will drag it out for years to get that victim. They'll cast a wide net and try and see who's the most vulnerable, who doesn't report to parents, who needs some kind of a parental figure and misinterprets the affection until it becomes sexual. I mean, they're absolute masters at what they do. They should win an award for how incredibly,
for sure,
adept they are. Yeah. So this teacher, so in the program, I mean, again, now you're 15, 16, everything's kind of funny, like you're laughing along with these teachers. They're really outrageous. They were big environmentalists, pillar of the community. They were anti-drinking and anti-drugs and obvious, like, incredible role models for teenagers, and they had a cult following, and the older kids seemed to really respect them. Like, it was just a perfect storm for abuse. And a lot of the joking was sexual. It was either sexual or humiliation. And none of the kids, when you're a teenager, the one thing you fear more than death is humiliation. So they weaponized humiliation. So I'll give you one example of how things worked. It was early on, and we were having a school dance in the program. And so, the teachers were there, like they always are, chaperones, right? But oh no, one of the teachers wanted to slow dance with me. And my body froze. I was like, why would I slow dance with a teacher? I was like, this is the most awkward, uncomfortable thing. This is a man who's middle-aged man, balding, who's got 3 kids and a wife. I'm like, why would we be slow dancing? But I didn't have the language, I didn't have the experience. I didn't know that this was like sort of step 1 towards like full-on sexual abuse. And so I tried to kind of hold him away from my body. Here we are at the dance, and imagine the lights and the music and everything. And I'm trying to hold my teacher away from me, like, God, like, don't touch me. And he stops everything and says to all the kids, look how frigid I am. He goes, she's so frigid. And honestly, the humiliation and the fear of it, like, I'm displeasing my teacher. In fact, I'm making my teacher so disappointed in me that he's using me as an example for the other kids. And so then I slow danced with him, and I can still feel the sickening feeling in my body of what it was like to be up against my middle-aged teacher and having to dance with them. It was grotesque.
Yeah. And so I know, like, you also mentioned that this is going on, and you're also been on this camping trip where he wants you to sleep in the sleeping bag with him.
Yeah. So this is the science teacher now. So when he joined the program a year later, he invited me as his counselor, which is a real honor, right? It's a leadership position for a kid. It's like, I'm going to counsel my peers because I've been on this canoeing trip before, and I've been chosen to be a leader. They play on all of these things. And it's hammered into kids from kindergarten all the way through the school system that the teacher has the special power to tell you your value. They can tell you how much you're worth. And that's why he gave me an A. He gave me an A to say, don't ever forget, I've got the power to open doors for you, and I've got the power to close them. Whatever mark I give you, whatever comments I give on your report card about your character, whatever opportunities I give you, that all comes from me. I am the teacher. Like, and as a kid in the school system, you're like, wow, that's a big place, big person to be connected to. So off I go as a school counselor. It's kind of rainy and cold. It's heavy duty camping, portaging, carrying backpacks. We were sleeping in like t-shirt and underwear kind of thing. Here I am in a tent with a man, my male teacher. It never should have even happened, but nobody was stopping it. Nobody was complaining that we were in danger. No school administrators were doing anything. Who was I to say this wasn't normal? And he said to me, yeah, it's so cold. We should really zip our sleeping bags together. And I just had that frozen
Scared
feeling.
to death. Yeah.
I just went, okay, that's not happening. That's not normal. I don't want to do that. But again, no language. I just rolled over and faced the wall of the tent and kind of hoped to survive. But then I went, and I want all your listeners to notice this pattern. I keep having these experiences, but I keep going back. I keep going back into situations where I'm even in more and more grave danger.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Right.
reason being is because I'm no longer, like, I'm not even a human being at this point. I'm just a shell of a person trying to navigate this. And I think that, I loved the wilderness. I loved camping. I loved canoeing. That was my place. That's where I felt happiest. And so when they invited me to go, again, invitation on this trip to the Yukon in the summer, I went on the trip, and this was the final trip. And at a certain point, there were 8 kids, and so we're 17 now, and they all went swimming naked with the teachers. Well, the first time around, I was like, I don't want to swim naked with my teachers. I don't want to, but I had nothing left.
Right.
Everybody else was doing it. So there was the peer pressure factor. So ultimately, and this was the lowest moment for me, this was the most soul destroying, brain destroying moment. The next time they went swimming, I couldn't make an excuse. I couldn't be the only outlier in the group. And so I took off all my clothes and swam with them. And they made comments about my body, sexualized comments about my body. And when I went to the police in my 50s and reported the abuse, because I finally could see it for what it was. And it took me till middle age.
That's what it took me as well.
I think that's normal, Linda. It's normal.
Okay.
It just goes to show you how much sweat you have to get out of your system, how hard you have to work, how powerful you have to be before you're strong enough to actually face this incredible trauma. It's so hard. And when I went to the police and reported, I spoke to them for 2 hours. I told them everything that happened, every detail that I could remember, that I could think of. And there was a number of things that I couldn't remember. And the only time I cried was when I told them about taking my clothes off. And I choked up, and I said to the police, I said, they finally broke me. And, so what I've been doing in many ways is trying to put myself back together for the last 40 years.
Yeah. And I know, like, I relate to a lot of your story. For me, my mom had manic depression, and she was going through a bout of it, where she would become suicidal. They'd give her shock treatment. And my grandmother kind of was like, oh, maybe you don't want to leave her with him. Like, she must, I'm just wondering, did she know something? But it was after she passed, and my mom was having a bout, and of course he was, oh my gosh, paying me all this attention. I'm not getting that from my mom, because she's got her own issues. And I can just remember, because I blocked so much of this out, but I know it's when we were learning to write. So I think it was like first grade. I remember my first grade teacher would be bringing me home, because she was trying to help out during this time. And he would be taking me, and he was a charmer. He would go, around town, kind of like an entertainer. Everybody loved him. Everybody thought he was just, everything. and he was grooming me. And I still remember it being, it's like I block a lot of it out, but I just remember there being this, we, for some reason, we're in the basement. I can't remember anything else. But then I remember going up to this room where there was a lot of antiques, and then the grooming starts, let's play a game. It's like, I'm 8, so he's got to make it like it's this game. And I start realizing, oh, well, he's asking me to do this next thing that I know am not comfortable with. I know at first I don't know these things. I don't know, right? And then the game starts going, awry. And then I know this isn't something that I want to partake in. Now, I go home. He pays me 50 pieces of silver, not to tell my parents. And he grew up in the Depression. So right there, when I come home with all this silver from the grandfather that would just hand my dad a 20 and say, we're even at Christmas, there's a problem. Okay. I cried. I told my parents, but there again, thank goodness I did, because who knows the damage down the road, right? If it would have continued like many people's do. And I look back now and I see how damaging all of it was for so many reasons, but also the fact that my parents had him sit at the holiday table every Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. Like, why am I sitting with my abuser at the holiday table? And it just teaches you, it devalues you. It does so many things. It teaches you so many wrong things that you have to unlearn. And I feel like it made me disassociate. I have to watch that, because it's like what you had to do was just disassociate. So you're like out of your body when something like that's happening. And I don't know if you can relate to that at all, but I think the biggest thing for me was I wasn't allowed really to talk about it and tell people. And we had family members that didn't want to believe it. So I think like there was a falling out with like favorite family members. And I didn't know why when I was a kid, but now I can look back and know everything. And I think I felt the shame and carried it to this day. Now I'm healing, but it's just such a thing.
I completely relate to that because I dissociated what happened to me as well. But I think I kind of feel thankful in the sense that, so when my son was at the same age as me, so he's 15, 16, and my husband and I find out that he's being humiliated by these teachers. And he's being singled out for scenes of public shaming. And students describe these scenes of public shaming as vicious. And our son can't tell us. He doesn't have the language. It's other kids' voices essentially reporting what was happening that got me to really understand what was happening. And it was my husband and my fault, I would say too, because our son tried to tell us what all parents need to know is a kid will float in front of you what's happening. They don't really know how to describe it. They know it's hurting them, but they don't know if it's their fault, especially when it's a teacher or a grandfather or,
Right.
A doctor. You're not trained to understand. You're always told that, when you get a reaction from an adult. Yeah. And when you get a reaction from an adult, it's in response to your behavior. So my son is a very skilled athlete. He seemed to think that this sort of onslaught of behavior he just didn't know if it was fair or not fair or whatever. And just like with me and my abuse, it's really important to have other normalizing figures. So in a sense, your parents protect you from your abuser, but then they normalize the abuse by seating the abuser with you as if they're not dangerous. And so the other teacher watching the scenes of public shaming of our son, who would hit a certain point where you'd have to try and get away, that teacher's yelling in his face these rhetorical questions, do you even deserve to be here? Just whatever. And you're the best player and you're not even trying, this kind of stuff. There's no answer for it. It's just designed to terrorize you, basically. And our son would at a certain point start to back up and try and get away from this yelling in the face. And the guy would grab him by the jersey or the arm. Now, when the other teacher doesn't do anything, that's a full-on assault. And when the other teacher doesn't do anything, it normalizes it for the other kids and for our son. So anyways, you can imagine for me, Linda, the trigger. Like when I started hearing this, I was like, yeah, no one's going to be abusing my son. No one's going to do to him what was done to me. Like, even though I couldn't really recognize my own abuse or explain it to myself or even really remember it at that point, I had a very strong reaction to, I told the school, I was teaching at the school at the time. I said, if you don't address this properly, I'm resigning. And, they don't want me to resign. I'm an award-winning teacher. I love working at the school. The kids love me. My colleagues love me. I'm a published author. I'm a researcher. I'm an academic. Like, they don't want to lose me. I've got a PhD. I make a private school that's university prep school look good. But I was like, no. And I did resign in protest. But I fought tooth and nail for my son. I'm still fighting it today. I want all kids protected, including my son. There was no way I was going to let those teachers do to him what was done to me. And what I discovered was, just like you did as a kid, it's an uphill battle. We are in a very broken system in our society right now. We tolerate and normalize not just bullying, but also abuse by adults. And until we change, right, we are going to continue to have huge social issues that we're seeing all over the world today.
Yeah. And, I don't know why you brought it back when you're talking, but I remember now it started out with tickling.
Ugh.
And so think about it,
it's textbook.
Right? It starts out with something that seems innocent at the time. But like how I know you said that you have all these methods and ways for people to heal that have been subjected to the bullying and the abuse, because I think, when that happens when you're young, unfortunately, unless you had parents that were really diligent, you carry it into adulthood and you don't even recognize that it's affecting your choices, your decisions, the things you allow to happen.
Well, so that was the quest I went on when I wrote The Bullied Brain. So the title of the book is The Bullied Brain, but in answer to your question, the subtitle is How to Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health. So I took a look at, I wanted to know the science, because people kept trying to tell me that what happened to my son wasn't a big deal. And, it was okay. And it was just motivational and all these kinds of cover-up phrases. And I just wasn't, I'm an academic. So I was like, well, let's see what the experts say. You can say whatever you want. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm going to find out what the research says. So when I took a look at the research, I found the psychiatry, the psychology, the education, you name it, all the research says any form of bullying and abuse done to kids, done to adults even, is really harmful. It's really limiting and damaging. But then I hit the neuroscience, and the brain scientists have a ton of research in looking at brain scans and seeing actually physical changes to the brain from all forms of bullying and abuse, including those that don't touch the body. So the yelling in the face, that does damage to the brain. Using, my son was exposed to all these homophobic slurs, that does damage to the brain. And it can be seen. It can be seen on a brain scan. So once you know that you've got this kind of harm done to your brain, the big next question is, and it was my question for the book, well, if the neuroscientists know all of this, surely they know how we can get better. And they do. They have a ton of research on evidence-based practices, which I put all through the book, teaching people, look, if you've had this done to you, here's what you need to do to get better. Here's the kinds of things you need to tackle with your brain, with your body, and with your mind. You have to get them back into realignment, and you need to get them back so that they're functioning and high performing and healthy again. And the beautiful thing is, Our brains are wired for repair and recovery. So it's a matter of putting in the time. It's not a quick fix. And you as an elite athlete would know it's hard work. You have to put in the sweat. You have to work hard. The brain is very much like a muscle. You can make it strong, you can make it resilient, you can make it flexible, and it governs your entire life and your entire experience and all your happiness and your relationships. So it's worthwhile. If we're going to put in that kind of hard work for our bodies and our strength and flexibility, then we need to do it for our brains. And we ignore our brains because they're invisible to us, but they are the absolute center of everything. And so, yeah, I found that really empowering and really inspiring.
So I thought you said something interesting. So when somebody, because I came, I was in a marriage of, with domestic violence, and left that behind. But like, I also realized that worse than even physically being abused is emotional, verbal, and you said yelling in your face. And I think so many of us don't realize the damage when somebody is up in our face yelling. Like your brain like freezes, like your amygdala, and there's a reason for that. So I love that you're kind of telling the science of somebody being up in your face yelling causing the brain damage that can be seen on like a screening, you said?
Yeah, it can be seen on fMRI, it can be seen on MRI, it can be seen on EEG. These are all the non-invasive technology that neuroscientists now can use to study our brains. So let's just walk through what's happening to the brain. If someone is yelling in your face, like in a domestic abuse situation, or in my son's case, the teacher's yelling in your face. And my son and the other boys reported that this happened hundreds of times, as I imagine in a marriage of years.
This is like a thing that happens everywhere. Somebody yelling in someone's face. Yeah.
Exactly. You get fired for doing it at work. You can't yell, especially in if you're the boss and you're yelling at in an employee's face, you can be fired for that instantly. But when my husband and I went to the police and we said, this teacher has been doing this to our son, they said, oh, that's motivation. That was like, oh, okay. Like the crazy broken
If the coach does it, it's motivation.
Yeah, it's motivation. So, but what's happening in the brain is really interesting. So if you are getting this kind of treatment and it's happening hundreds of times, and the person is in a position of power over you. Now, a husband who's stronger potentially, that's a position of power. In my son's case, of course, it's a teacher. And the yelling makes your body think, and you gave the example of
that you're a threat, that you're under threat.
It's an enormous threat. So the brain and the body interpret this as a very significant threat to life, basically. They start pumping the body full of adrenaline and cortisol. Now, the adrenaline will, let's cut to an hour later, you go home. Your adrenaline will go down, but the cortisol, which is a corrosive stress hormone, keeps pumping up in the body and the brain because the body and the brain have gotten dysregulated because this is happening way too frequently. You should be responding as a brain and body to a threat like a predator that you see quite rarely. It's not a daily occurrence to encounter a predator. And the brain interprets this as a predator's going to kill you. And so that's why it primes you to freeze like a rabbit, or to fight like a dog, or to run away as fast as you can like a deer. Right? These are the bodies, we're animals, and these are the body reactions and brain reactions for survival. Well, if you're dealing daily with a social predator, like a teacher who's abusive, you're anticipating, you're sitting in class at 9 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon before you go to practice. You're anticipating that this guy is going to socially and physically basically try to destroy you in front of your peers. And this is when you have adolescent brain development. So your brain is very sensitive to peers. So all that time from 9 in the morning till 3, the cortisol is pumping because your brain and body are going, we're going to be in danger. This is going to, and it gets completely dysregulated, and it's the cortisol. Now, not only does it dismantle brain architecture and erode it in completely shocking ways, it also destroys blood vessels. It causes all kinds of inflammation in the body. It leads to chronic illness. This is all extensively documented in science by doctors and brain scientists. And the fact that we're not changing how we conduct ourselves as a society with this knowledge is what's got to change. It's why I wrote the book.
What about the wife that has a husband that thinks he has the open, when he's upset, the open season to just get up in her face and yell, like, and it's accepted. It's totally accepted in our society that when a couple has an argument of the yelling, and, and somewhat, I think a lot of women accept their husbands. They may not like it, but they accept them yelling in their face.
I would encourage those women and their husbands to read the brain science. I mean, I include the research even in my book. Read the brain science on what that's doing to your brain. Now, if you set that husband down and said, hey, do you want to do damage to your kid's brain or your wife's brain? That husband, 99% would say, absolutely not. I can't think of anything worse. Then I would say to him, okay, what we need to do here is we have to learn that you're getting triggered by certain things. It's usually from almost guaranteed from the past. So something that's happened to you that's been a trauma that's making you go into fight. Now, you might go into freeze, I might go into flight, but these guys that are yelling, they're going into fight mode. So they're pumping up as much cortisol and adrenaline as the woman victim, right? Everybody's brain is getting damaged. It's not healthy for these guys. These are the guys that
I didn't think it would be. I'm like, you're gonna blow a gasket,
They've got high blood pressure, they've got heart disease issues, they get cancer. I mean, it's not healthy for the human body, especially when you're in a relationship of trust and care and intimacy, to behave like a social predator. Think about it. It's crazy. But people we don't teach our kids, for the most, it's changing now, but really children and adults, if we took the time that we put into television and the internet, and we put half an hour a day into mindfulness training, where we did deep breathing, we did visualization, we did creating space between stimulus and response. So creating space between the trigger trauma and how we react, if we're a very aggressive reactor, because that's how we think we're going to keep ourselves safe. It's the 21st century. You can have a nervous breakdown like that about a financial stress. That will feel like a trauma to you. And if you go into fight mode, it's not good for the people in your world that you care about. And it's really not good for you. So can't we make a change? Can't we learn a different way? Of course we can.
I love that. That's so, so good. And I just want to backtrack a little bit to the response that you had. And I feel I had a very similar response when this was going on. And they are predators and they look for their prey. And you were prey, and I was, of course, prime prey, because nobody was paying attention, right? And so you're this prey, and they prey upon you. And then I started kind of doing this, instead of this. I used to sit straight up at the piano. My teacher would remark on my back, and then it was more hiding, shame, right, of being a girl, that is it my fault this is going on. And you said you had a similar response. If you could kind of explain it for the audience.
Yeah, no, I had an identical response. So, I mean, in grade 12, so now I'm 18, I was voted the worst dressed girl at school in the yearbook, because I would wear like really baggy sweatpants and really baggy. I didn't want anyone to notice me. I certainly didn't want to be noticed sexually. I just wanted to keep my head down and survive, and I wouldn't have expressed it that way to myself. I just was doing, I was just presenting in a way that kept me safe. And when I look back now, I'm really thankful to my brain. I'm like, you know what? You were so smart. You were doing your own thing to keep me okay. And the one thing you got to know now is I'm powerful. I'm out there. I'm not going to be a victim ever again. I'm not anybody's prey. A social predator, I laugh in their face. So you know what, brain? You can stand down. You don't have to govern me in this kind of like cowering way anymore, because I'm powerful and my mind is in charge. You're the incredible engine that drives me, but it's always my mind. I check in with my mind. And that's not to say I'm this perfect person who doesn't lose it. talk about yelling. I can be triggered and yell.
Yeah,
I
of
can get
course.
really mad very
Sure.
infrequently, but honestly, you would be shocked, Linda. I can turn into a little volcano when I'm mad. And, I can look back and just say to myself, you know what? That is not mindful. I don't want to be like that. And I can apologize. I've even yelled at my kids, right? I love my kids more than myself. I've still lost it and yelled and gotten into this panicky state. And I go to them after and say, oh my God, I am so sorry. And they get it. They're just like, of course, you got triggered and whatever, like you're human. So I don't want to present myself as like, oh, somehow I've come to this wise woman's pinnacle. I haven't. It's a work in progress at all
Yeah,
times.
right. And I really want to just bring out the takeaway that you say the so what, setting high expectations in an atmosphere of safety, trust, and empathy is light years away from using threats, humiliation, and cruelty if the goal is high achievement. And you go into the science again, that there's visual evidence in the brain scans that damage occurs when we're subjected to bullying and abuse. And that like it scars the brain even. And I just think that's so important for people to understand and recognize when we're talking about the subject, because I think bullying, abuse, threats, yelling, all of these things are, they're out there, and it's going on right now somewhere, maybe across the street.
Or in politics, in the
Yeah,
highest levels of power and prestige in our society, and they publicly behave like awful bullies to one another. And we just normalize it. We normalize, look at the internet just to see incredible lack of compassion, absolute lack of empathy, all sorts of just cruelty abounds. And really, as a society, it's not sustainable. We have got to learn that that's unhealthy, and it's not connected to high performance at all. People think that, that all of those things, it's that myth, and I debunk this myth with science in the book, but it's the myth that, abuse is a necessary evil for greatness. Well, that's just patently not true when you look at the research. The research says the opposite. And, so you get very high level people, like an example of a very high performer would be Harry Kane, one of the world's greatest soccer players. He's British. He uses daily brain training because he knows that it's going to make him an even better athlete. And the brain training is used all over the world by high performers because they know it's like, why would you train your body to the highest level, and why wouldn't you train your brain? Your brain requires as much work. It's hungry for learning. And if you have been bullied or abused and you do have neurological scars on your brain, there's nothing stopping you from doing all the evidence-based practices that can repair them. That your brain has neuroplasticity or brain plasticity. You can change your brain by what you practice and the environments you're in, all the way until your final moment on the planet. And that's so empowering.
I love that. And I love the fact that we can heal our brain. And then just again, reiterating that if somebody is being bullied and threatened right now at this very moment, and they're experiencing the brain freeze, the flight, the cortisol, what is your advice to them?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, emotion concepts. I think that we've created a big problem in our society by we start with children and we tell them that if they're being bullied, that the bully has the power. That's mistake number one. If I was teaching kids, I would say to them, and adults in the workplace who are being harassed or bullied, I would say to them, you know what? We need to become a society whereby if you see someone bullying someone else, you go and tell a teacher, because the bully is raising the red flag, whether it's at the workplace or at high school or in sports or on the playground. That bully is publicly showing that they are having some mental health challenges that are very serious. So if you get up in the morning and you go to school, or you get up in the morning and you go to work or to your sport or to arts or whatever, and you need to find a target in order to get whatever it is you need out of the day, you are a person struggling with mental illness, right? That's unhealthy. You don't need anyone to have a creative, active, engaged, meaningful day. Neither do I. I don't need to go and find somebody. I'm not hunting for anybody that can somehow make me feel whole because I have such a profound lack. I'm mentally strong. I'm resilient. I don't need anybody else. So when you see a child behaving that way, it's a red flag that that child is suffering and struggling in an extremely serious way. So why do we teach other kids that they have power? The bully doesn't have any power. They conjure up an image of power by trying to make other children feel certain ways. And we let our kids feel certain ways. Like, don't. When you see a kid or your boss or anyone, a friend of yours, your husband, if they act in a bullying way, you want to stop them in their tracks and you want to say, look, you're manifesting mental illness here. I'm concerned about you. We need to get you some help. We need to get a remedy in place. We need to talk about a healing plan. There's something very, very wrong. You've got a lack.
And the bully is covert because that's the problem. It's not like what was going on with you. I think you could, they were really crossing the line, swimming naked with their students. Okay. But many times it's, they know how to skate that line where you can't really call it out because it isn't really like it's there, but it's not there. So what does a student, a wife, a worker do in the situation where it's covert and nobody is experiencing it but them?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. First of all, let me just clarify. Those teachers were sleeping. They were having sex with the students, the selected, targeted girls. That's why the humiliation was really important for them. They needed to humiliate us because that made the girls more afraid, more vulnerable, more willing to sexually engage, because no teenager wants humiliation. That's dangerous. So yeah, that's a very typical pattern with an abusive individual. They have the targets and they have the beneficiaries. So in the workplace, a psychopath, for example, if you go and interview everyone in the company, half the people will say it's like your grandpa. He's the greatest person, adored, trustworthy, an entertainer, everyone loves him. There's no possible way that human being could be the same as the person who up in the attic is abusing a child. That doesn't make sense, right? The brain self-destructs when you try to tell it to hold those two things together, but that is the profile of an abusive individual. They're the pillar of the community, they're the head of the church, they're the one that makes the most, whatever, friends and donations. And they are also the person that behind closed doors is destroying people. Usually.
And then the person that's being abused then feels like, how can I call this person out? They're, a doctor, a lawyer, a pastor, a priest, my teacher, right?
Yeah. And oftentimes, like you reported that person that reached out to you on your show. Policemen, they reported to you on the show and they said, I did report my abuse and I wasn't believed. That's actually, I'm horrified to say, but that's actually happens quite a bit because the brain can't hold the two things together. So what I would say to a victim of covert stuff going on, first of all, recognize you're dealing with Dr. Jekyll, the respected good doctor who's loved by the community and has a wonderful family and is a church-going man. You've got Dr. Jekyll on the one hand, but for a fact when the door closes, he's Mr. Hyde. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde will show up a lot in abuse literature. It's taken from a 19th century novella that was about a doctor who also was this murderous Mr. Hyde individual. So abuse researchers like me use that as a catchphrase to quickly just let people know what we're talking about here, because it's a typical profile of an abuser. So if you're the victim of covert abuse, the best thing you can do is start keeping a journal, so you don't lose your mind, because they're trying to play on society, everything, and they're trying to use their reputation. And also oftentimes when you call these people out, they instantly go on the attack. So you say, so-and-so has done these abusive things. They go, oh, I'm the victim of a witch hunt. They're trying to hurt me. They're
And
trying
they
to ruin
switch
my
it onto
reputation.
you.
They switch it on you, and suddenly the whole system will do this to you. It'll go 180 degrees, and you're seen as the problem, and you get re-victimized. This is typical. So in order to keep your own brain from getting really, really confused, which is unhealthy for brains, because their job is to make meaning. And if they can't make meaning of reality, the system starts to degrade. So you need to be very careful and really caring of your brain. If you write it down, then you're keeping track of the date and the time and the incident that happened. You want to remember very clearly what so-and-so said, because they're not trustworthy. And also to trust your instincts. I mean, I think you and I were both saved because we have a strong instinctual drive within us for self-protection. You went and told your parents, you knew a line was being crossed. Same with me. I was trying to navigate the space like you were, but I also had a core sense that I was not happy. I wasn't comfortable with what they were doing. I didn't want to have anything sexually to do with them. Yes, I wanted them to like me. They were my teachers. I wanted to go out in the wilderness. I wanted to have these incredible experiences, but I just didn't know how to navigate their unpredictable and unhealthy behavior.
Yeah, totally. So the after effects, what would you say that you've done to heal, and what still lingers?
Well, I mean, I ended up with just a pretty significant eating disorder. Of course, very typically, I had bulimia, which then became anorexia. The anorexia was so bad, I stopped getting my period at like 18 years old. And of course I did. I didn't want to be a woman. I didn't want to be sexual. I didn't want men to be doing things like this to me. I just, I was a kid. I wanted like romance. I wanted boys my own age. I wanted to learn to fall in love with another kid. I didn't want middle-aged men like manipulating me. And so, I grappled with that for a long time. I also had, I did a fair bit of self-harm, like cutting and, just these
Oh,
kinds of,
yes, that's so typical then.
yeah,
Yes,
typical.
of abuse. Yeah.
Yeah. But, now I'm happy to say, especially after the deep dive into, fighting for my son and teaching my son, like
Yeah.
the opposite to you, where you had to sit with your abuser at the table. My husband and I, and there was a whole group, there was like 30 parents. We just were like, absolutely not. We're not letting our kids be treated this way. And we're going to take it to as far as we can take it to ensure that other children are protected too. And, our son got the message that he was valuable, that he was worth fighting for, that he did not ever need to be treated that way. There was no excuse for it. It was not okay. And that was really healthy and good. And I learned by watching him, get healthy again, that I too could get healthy. And then I found the neuroscience, and really I put together a program for myself. As you know, I walk my reader through it in the book, and I've come out the other end. My body and my mind and my brain are aligned. And I worked hard to do it through fitness and through mindfulness and through very specific exercises that I teach in the book that are evidence-based for how you recover. And we can recover. That's the great news.
And you toughen up, like the coaches that are, old school yelling in the face, they think that enhances performance, but in actuality, it causes failure of performance many times, right?
Absolutely. Because just think of it, if the brain is getting traumatized, if it's getting threatened, then it's pumping cortisol and adrenaline. It's not in the calm state. Like when you're in flow, and this is why elite athletes like the late Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, they use flow states to perform. And then when you're in a flow state, danger is not even there. Like you are totally emotionally connected with your teammates and your coach. You are aware of the game in an almost kind of like surreal way because you're just in this high performance state. All athletes have been to this place. It's like runner's high, where it's like time slips away. It's like you're so aligned, mind, brain, body, that you're on a different plane. And that's where high success and high performance happen. And think about the workplace, think about professional athletes. There's nobody coming up and screaming in the face of CEOs and terrorizing them and making them try and do their work while they're being yelled at and obscenities are being thrown their way. And why don't we do it with CEOs and top performing athletes? Because it doesn't work.
So true. So true. This is so good. This has been so good today. Can you tell everybody the name of your book? Do you have it where you can hold it up?
I do not have
Oh,
it here.
okay.
I'm so sorry. It's a perfect match to you because it's a beautiful pink covered book. It would look so good with you, Linda.
I am bright today. I do love pink though. Can you tell everybody the name of your book, where they can get it, and where they can reach you on social media?
Yes. So the name of the book is The Bullied Brain: Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health. And if you just type into Amazon, Bullied Brain, Jennifer Fraser, it'll come right up. And if you do get it on Amazon and you like it, I would love a review because it's how we draw attention to our books on Amazon. And my website is bulliedbrain.com. It's full of free resources, hundreds of different articles and podcasts and work that I do. I'm more than happy to have people reach out to me. I do lots of speaking engagements and I do workshops, and I also coach people one-on-one. So, if you're needing anything from me, please email me through my website. I'm happy to help and point you in the direction of some of the research if that's going to help you, whatever. And my social media handles are all at Bullied Brain. So on Twitter, I'm at Bullied Brain. On my Facebook page on this material is at Bullied Brain, etc. So yeah, if you just remember that, you'll find me.
And you had a freebie for everybody today.
Yes, I'm going to send to you so that you can share it with your community. I'm going to give a link to one of my online courses. I think I'm going to give the link to the adolescent brain course because I think the more we learn about brain development in our young people, the more we can support them. So it's called Working with the Adolescent Brain. And I'll give you a coupon code so people can access it for free for the next little while.
Perfect. So make sure you check in the show notes for that. And please DM Sisterhood of Sweat on Instagram. Any of the questions, anything that resonated with you about this episode, because I know, as always, whenever I have an episode like this, it really, there are so many people out there that have went through a lot of this type of thing, that they identify with the message and they need the healing. They need to be able to talk about it with somebody. So I love to get your DMs. And if you resonated, please give us a review and check out the course and the show notes. And I really, I loved the information that you brought today. And just the conversation, bringing things to the forefront that need to be talked about. And I just so appreciated you today, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Linda. I thought we had definitely a meeting of minds and we've had similar experiences. And I just love to see someone like yourself be so successful despite really tough challenges.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That I love that you said that, because that right there is, we don't have to let our circumstances hold us back. It's what we do about them instead.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And that's why you're an inspiration.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody today for listening. And as always, keep on keeping on. Bye, everyone.